You're listening to the Launchcast, the podcast about leadership, business, life, and growth with me, your host, George Andriopoulos.
It's like food for your ears.
At this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast.
The storm is coming, but I'm prepared.
45 episodes, goosebumps every time.
But don't be scared.
It's episode 206. This one's called Let's Go to Lisa Live at the Scene, and you'll find out why in a minute. Man, we have leadership, business, life, growth today. You know how we do this on the Launchcast, but first, it's the LaunchDad himself bringing you your favorite podcast on the planet. It's true. It's damn true. As the beat drops.
Into the black hole.
God, I feel so cool when I do that. I feel like Uncle Jesse and Zach Morris had a baby, and that baby had a podcast, and that podcast is the Launchcast. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming back for another week of the Launchcast. I am so excited for this week. We'll get into it in a minute. I want to thank you guys, first of all. Last week, that little Clubhouse episode that we did, the simulcast on Clubhouse, doing the leadership room alongside recording for the podcast, was incredible. We had such amazing reviews, and so I'm pretty sure, I think that's going to be a weekly segment every week where we're doing leadership on Clubhouse until they shut me down, right? Until they shut me down. But I don't want to waste any more time. You guys are here for the real deal. You guys are here for our guest. So let me do the bio first, and then I will bring her on screen. You know what? No. I'm going to bring her on screen because she deserves to be on screen. Hello,
George!
Lisa Mateo. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. You have the best theme music. I'm telling you.
Right?
Get you pumped, to get you excited into the black hole. Like, it's just awesome.
I love it. I love it. Guys, here's the bio. Lisa Mateo, journalist, speaker, certified personal trainer. Lisa is a New York Emmy Award-nominated reporter, anchor, and TV host with over 20 years broadcast experience. A graduate of Rutgers University, Lisa began her career in TV as a production assistant for the Pix 11 Morning News, where she grew to fill roles as producer, reporter, and anchor. 18 years at Pix 11. Produced, hosted a number of half-hour specials. Her most memorable experience, which we're going to talk about today, were her travels to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Lisa recently moved on from local news to the national stage as a reporter for CBS News NewsPath. Man, I'm going to cover all of this stuff, so I'm not even going to dive too much into it. But number one here is she's from the Brooks. She's from Brooklyn.
That's right.
She's born in Brooklyn, New York.
Girl.
Even though she lives in New Jersey now, but I'm going to let that one slide, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you for having me. This is great. And what you're doing is awesome. It's fantastic what you're doing. So congrats to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Let us dive in. First question. You know what it is. Every single interview. Lisa, are you a leader?
I would have to say yes. It's not something I thought I would ever be, but just because from after so many years of being on Channel 11 and being in the public eye, and going out there and just talking to the people on the street, everyday people, I think it's after a while people see you as someone they can trust, as someone they respect, as someone who they can just feel comfortable with because you had that same respect for them. So a leader is just someone who has that, who's able to earn the trust, from whoever they're around, who's able to have that respect, and who's able to be relatable. And I think that's really, really true, because there's a difference. You can manage people, but to be a leader, you have to have their respect at the same time. And I think that's a huge thing. And for me, I mean, I'm not the head of a big corporation. I'm not the head, a leader that way. It's how are you a leader? Are you a leader, in your family? Are you a leader for people out there who are just looking for advice? Are you a leader in my online community of fitness folks that I have? So yeah, that's how I see leadership in that way.
Yeah, and one thing you said right at the onset of that was that you never set out to be a leader, right? And I think, we've talked to so many people on this show, and I think that's really the resounding theme there, right? Because, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if you set out to be a leader, you're either like the most special person ever, or it's like contrived, and you're trying too hard. And are you really a leader when you do that, right?
Right. No,
so
definitely. I mean, you've seen people who are like those born leaders who, when you're a young kid, they're always the one who wants to be the captain of the team or this or that. I was like that quiet kid, like in the background.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah. And born leaders, I think, it's a misnomer. I could totally see it. It's funny. My daughter, who you met a few minutes before we started the show, I remember I went to one of her parent-teacher conferences early on. I think it was like first grade or something like that, first or second grade. And she was a rowdy one, right? But reminded me of myself very much so. And so the teacher had said something where it was like, she's always jumping forward. She wants to be the one that's in charge, but we gotta manage it right now so she could be social, but keep that for later on in her life, right? And I was like, that is the most perfect description ever of how we do this. But I think we all have those kind of traits, and sort of our experience really molds them, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It definitely does. And I don't know. I think for me, I was just like, I don't know. I guess I'm the oldest of 4 girls. I have 3 younger sisters. So I was always the one, telling everyone what to do. And my mom would depend on me because, she was working and my dad was working. And, I was the one kind of managing everything. So I was kind of thrust in that role in a way. As the oldest, to take the responsibility for all that, the first to go to college, the first to do all these things, the first to move out of the house with my boyfriend who became my husband, which my dad was not very happy about at the time. But I think that kind of brought me in, in college, I was the president of my sorority. Like these roles kind of found me, and it was because people, not the sister role, being the older sister, but in college, for the president of sororities, because people saw that in me. They said, you know what, you need to lead this, you need to do this. So they elected me for those positions, and that's when I started to realize, like, hey, people are listening to me and respect me, and and that's when you kind of realize, like, okay, college is when I grew like into the person that I started to become.
Yeah, incredible. So let's start at the beginning, like we always do, right? We tell the whole life story. And so you were born in Brooklyn to Puerto Rican parents. You're the oldest of 4 daughters. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff going forward, because the internet. The internet. I don't have the same kind of journalistic integrity that you do when you research stories. So wherever I find it, I pull it, right?
Oh gosh. This could be fun.
I'm kidding. Okay. So I did read that your parents, and I found this interesting. I did read that your parents moved to mainland United States when they were young, and talked to you and your siblings only in English. Is that true? To make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think it was because when my father came here, he was very young, and he grew up in Brooklyn too, in Bed-Stuy, and when he went to school, he didn't know the language when he came here, so he was left back, and he always felt like that was a detriment in a way. So for us, we always spoke English. My mom, came here when she was younger too, so they always grew up speaking English. And I think that's the one thing that I always wish I had done better, is to be fluent in Spanish. I took it upon myself to learn. I went to school, I took all the, that was my minor in college, but it was always that that thing that I wish I always had, that fluency, that everyone else, my family members, like I can talk to my grandmother, in Spanish, and it's I can do different conversations, but I couldn't take it to that next level. And I
Yeah.
always wanted to do this. And it was the hardest thing because, growing up in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn where I was, it was like, hey, everybody was kind of like me. Like we were all like different nationalities and different colors and then my parents decided, well, we did the hop to Staten Island first. And then you do the
And
hop
then to Jersey. Yeah. That's how it works.
But it was a culture shock in a way, because then we moved to a town in Coleonia, New Jersey, and it was a culture shock. It was different. I was the one who stood out from everyone else. I was a little bit different. And people would say, oh, you're Spanish. Well, how come you don't speak Spanish? What kind of Spanish person are you? And I'm like, I'm Puerto Rican. Yeah, I don't speak, but that's who I am. And, it was always this like back and forth culture thing, growing up for me. And I'm the only actually one out of my sisters who does speak Spanish. But it's always, but what my parents did instill in me is that respect in the culture, and the love for the island and the love for the people. And that's what always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I did read that the way you learned Spanish was through school.
Right.
And although you may not consider yourself very strong in the language, you're still super proud of your heritage. And I think that's a testament to how you were raised and where you come from. I don't think, it's a prerequisite to have to speak the language. I mean, I'm first generation born here. My parents are both off the boat, but I speak fluent Greek. But my kids don't speak Greek, but I impress in them how, our heritage and what it's about and how important it should be in their lives. And, you speak it or not, whatever. Right.
Right. It's about like what's inside, what you teach them about, like where you're from, for me, it's the island, everything about the history of it and the culture and the people and the food and the flavor and the sounds. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, food. I have to talk to you about food later. We'll get into all that. I know you're a foodie. Talk to me about Jersey. Talk to me about growing up. What was life like growing up for Lisa Mateo?
Gosh, I was always the tomboy because I was the oldest, like you said, of four girls. And I was, I guess, my dad's only son, like, because I played everything.
Sure.
Like I was on the basketball court. I was, it was from swimming to volleyball to track to, you name it. That's what I did because I just loved it. I love the competition of it. I love just being out there and the camaraderie of the different girls and the different teams. And that's what it was like for me. I was voted like most athletic in high school. Like it was just, that was my love and my passion. But yeah, that's what I mean, it was just like that different like culture shock. Like I said, like Brooklyn is how I remember like riding my bike. And that's how I learned, I played it, with my friends in the street. And then, Jersey was like probably 5th, 6th grade, and then you're meeting a new crowd and you're joining new friends. And yeah, so that's what I remember most about it. But it was really like that college life that I really came into my own light and my own voice. Because I was just, always trying to take care of my sisters and take care and make sure everything was okay and come home and study. Like it was just like a never ending thing, So yeah.
Well, I think there was a strong vibe of leadership, based on what you're saying there, being the oldest, like you mentioned before. But I want to talk about before we get into college, your passion for journalism. I did read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, that you have had passion about news and journalism since elementary school. Is that true?
Yeah. You know what it was is I always, because I was that quiet type too, I always loved to write. So I would always have journals that I would keep and I would always write in journals. And that was my way because I kept to myself, and that was my way of venting about things and about saying things of how I felt. And that I took into when I got to high school, I wrote for the school paper. Basically it was the sports section and I wrote about this everything that was going on in sports, but I did those little community stories too. And it's funny when I went to college, like I went for business. Like, who did I think I wanted to be this power woman on Wall Street? And then I took economics my freshman year, and I was like, who am I kidding? Like, I don't like this. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's what I always tell, kids who are going out in college. My son too, who's a freshman in college, and just tell them, try and see what you like, and find your niche. And I did. I found that, then I started writing for the college paper, and then I started, taking that love that I had for writing, and I kept with it, and that's how I turned this passion that I had that I never knew I can turn into something. I always thought it had to be business. My dad was a banker, and, it was just, and I realized that I could take what I loved and turn it into something, that I can do, that I can make into a career. And it was fantastic. That's how I started in newspapers.
So was that the goal early on? I know you said early in college you were sort of figuring it out, but post high school and early college years, was there a goal to sort of get into this lane?
It was. I never had the TV mindset, though. That was the thing. I was always a behind the scenes person, and I liked the newspaper gig, but I remember this one story. I was at a fire, and I was covering it for a local newspaper at the time. I forget. It was my first year out of college. I think I was making like $18,000 a year. And I went there, and it was burning, everything was, burning down, and I have my newspaper, my notepad, and I'm writing down. And it was at that moment that I realized I wanted to tell someone then. And that's when that spark clicked in my head. And I said, I want to tell people live. Like, I don't want to sit here and write it down and go back to my computer and write it up. And like, I want to tell someone now, and that's when I realized that switch, that this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
But it was hard for me, because like I said, I was the shy one. Like I was like, what am I, crazy again? Thinking that I can talk in front of people, and I'm the shyest person in the room. But I stepped out from that because I knew that it's what I wanted to do. I knew that it was that feeling inside of me that said, I got to tell somebody now. I want to tell this story. I want to tell the story of the people who were affected by this. And that was the turning point for me.
Yeah. Well, you had to start somewhere and then build the career and the passion and see where it went from. Yeah. I don't want to brag here, but I also started in paper as well. I was the sports editor of the Farmingdale High School Paper Lion. Thank you.
There you go.
So yeah, so samesies here. So yeah, graduate of Rutgers College with a double major in journalism and communications and a minor in Spanish, and totally Jimmy Valvano. All the way, Rutgers. Love it. So you began your career in print news as a staff writer for the Suburban Trends newspaper in New Jersey, where you wrote feature stories, local news, and breaking news, and then you moved on to TV. So what was that transition like for you? What was and I want to point out here, we've talked about sort of how this has evolved since you were a kid up until now. But we talk about on this show these moments called spark moments, where sort of these things happen that sort of bring us down a path in life, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And so I was curious to see if there was a specific spark moment for you that's brought you into the TV world.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think it was that fire that I was in. And then what that did is that put that spark in me to start looking into it, because TV is not, you can't just show up and say, hey, I'm here and I want to do this. Like you it's a tough industry to get into. You really have to work at it. And at the time, what they had is a lot of stations had what they call broadcasting seminars. So it was like a course that the stations would have. And so I went and I applied for it. They accepted me. And right when I finished taking that course, they were starting a brand new morning show called, well, at the time it was called the WB11 Morning News. And they were looking for people to start that show. And it's funny, they loved my writing so much, but they loved it for the promos because I was quick, I was witty. And they're like, yeah, we want to bring you into, to do the promos. And I was like, no, I'm a I want to do the journalism part of it.
Yeah.
So I remember I went to the interview and I sat there, with the news director, and I just said, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to be a reporter. And he's just sitting there going, okay, another one who wants to be on TV. Right. And so he said, thanks. And I didn't hear. And then the next thing I know, I got a call and I said, I got the job. But at the time, like I was working for a magazine. So I left a higher paying job to take a salary cut because this is something that I really wanted to do. And sometimes people are afraid to do that. Granted, I was young at the time and I could have done it. And, I took the risk and that was fine, but I did. But the funniest thing, and not many people notice, is that my boss who hired me, who interviewed me, he actually mixed up the resumes and I wasn't supposed to get the job.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
So I walked in the first day. He didn't tell me this till like a year later. He goes, you know what really happened, Mateo? And I'm like, what? And he's like, I wasn't really going to hire you.
Oh, man.
What? He's like, but you're the best mistake I ever made.
Ah,
I was like,
amazing.
Oh, great. That was great.
That's amazing.
Because
And that was around 2000, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was a 2000. And it was just great because once I got in the door, like that was it. Like that was my launch pad. Like I was like, this is it. This is where I'm going. And you have to work. If you're going to be in that business, you got to work. Holidays, you got to work. Weekends, you got to work. Whenever you can, you have to wake up it was a morning show. I had to wake up at 2:00 in the morning. You had to, go here. I was coming from Jersey, coming into the city, back and forth. And sometimes working like different jobs. And so they saw that. And then I became a producer from there. And then my first on-air job was in the helicopter, doing the traffic.
Wow.
And let me tell you, thank goodness I wasn't afraid of heights or got motion sickness.
Oh man, I would not have done it. I would have been like, see you later. I'm going. No, I'll be your assistant again.
But it was awesome. Like being the first person, to see that sunrise every morning as you fly over New York City. There was nothing better than that.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was an incredible experience. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question because I'm a total TV head when it comes to not only watching, but the inner workings of it and everything. So I remember back then the WB was like a fledgling network, and it was hot at the time. Hot. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know what, and I guess this is my question: what kind of effect does the rest of the programming have on news, or vice versa? Because I remember that was like Dawson's Creek and Felicity and all that stuff was on WB back then. Yes, that was like my early college years.
Right, and then it changed to like CW, and then like
yeah. So what kind of effect did I guess it was a hot network. I mean, does that have an effect on the news as well?
It was kind of two separate entities. We would always have, like the stars would come on our show and, we would go interview them and kind of cross promote in that way. But it was always, its own separate entity, The great thing about what was different about the morning show is that you got your news, but you also had, your local, because it was local news. You got your local stories. You got your those inner neighborhood stories that sometimes we don't hear of at the same time, throughout the boroughs. And what was great for me is that, I got to cover a lot of stories in Brooklyn, where I'm from. And it's like, I would drive past, the house that I used to live at, and it was just like surreal. It was crazy. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
Well, that's what I want to get into in a minute. Let me just, say this line here that I have on my notes, and then I'm going to get into it. So you reported on and anchored several historical events, right? And this is what I want to touch on a little bit, including 9/11, the suicide bombings at the airport and metro station in Brussels, Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Maria, right? So we had, and I mentioned this to you when we talked last week, we had Carol Silva on one of our earlier episodes, who was
that was anchor. A great episode. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And not only was it one of my favorites, but her two episodes were still they're the two top rated episodes we've ever had, right? She was so incredible on this, but what really got me on that episode was when we talked about why she was able to stick around for so long, and talking about these specific events. She became a trusted figure in this hyper-local news idea, right? That News 12 was all about. And so it's that same idea, right? It's local, Pix 11 or WB or whatever. It's local stuff. You're from Brooklyn. You're one of us. Do you feel that had an effect on your engagement with your audience?
Oh yeah, I think it made me more relatable, and I think that's what most people loved about when, for example, when I would go out in the street, it'd be in the middle of anywhere, and people would just come up like, "Hey," like I was their family member, like I was their sister or whoever, and you had that connection because one of the things I always tried to do, I didn't want to be, that news, have that you have that persona, and I wanted it to be genuine and me, and that's how I spoke, I pretended the camera, like I'm looking at the camera to me was me talking to the person who's sitting in the kitchen, the person who's sitting there going through a tough time, the person who's sitting there and maybe just got some bad news, and my job was to take that and turn their day around and make them start their day off on the right foot. And I think me being that way and being relatable is how people resonated. And I think that is so important, is just to be authentically you. Don't try to be the typical reporter, typical anchor. Be yourself. You can tell a news story, but be yourself at the same time by telling a story, not being a fact teller, but telling a story. Tell the story of what's happening, not this many people were killed or this many people died. Tell the story behind it, and I think that makes the difference, and that's what people resonate to and relate to.
Yeah. As a viewer, right, I feel that way as well. When we're talking about the national stage, right, we're talking about politics, which we've been talking about for
Mhm.
for years ad nauseum, right? I'm okay with hearing it from Anderson Cooper or Ted Koppel or Dan Rather, I'm fine with that. But when we're talking about something that happens here, in my town, where I'm from, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from Carol. I want to hear from Sukanya. Like I want to
Yes.
hear it from my people, like the people that experience it, because it's a different vibe. So I want to talk to you specifically about some of those instances because it fascinates me. Particularly, we'll start with 9/11. I remember, and I don't know why I go back and watch this stuff, but I love looking up old just newscasts and major broadcasts. I remember listening to Howard Stern. I remember watching Dave Letterman. I remember, all the local stuff. And just, I don't know. There's something about it that was just so magical and special to me. So, what was it like during that time as a journalist for you?
Wow. It was tough. I was at that time, I was a producer, and I was before I started reporting. And I remember at that time, the hardest thing for me at 9/11, which was one of the biggest learning lessons, was learning how to separate personal from business. And I think that was the hardest thing because my husband at the time worked he used to take the train from Jersey up there, right to One World Trade. At the same time, 9 o'clock, he would be up exactly, when that plane struck. So it was hard to focus, but I knew I did have to. I had a job to do. I had people to call to try and get, people for them to talk to on the set. I had other things that I had to do. I had to keep going. But at the same time, it's like, I haven't heard from my husband. What's going on? Like he comes up at this certain time, like what happens? And, because no one could get, in contact with anyone. Their phone lines were down, like everything was just crazy. And so he walked all the way from One World Trade, all the way to where we were at 42nd and Second, because that's all he could have done. Everything was just closed, shut down. And he remembers, coming out of that subway, seeing dark, things falling down, from the ceiling, like not remembering, not realizing what was going on. And for us, it was about getting the stories. Sukanya, you mentioned, a dear friend of mine. Gosh, you need to talk to her. She's a dear friend.
Oh, I'd love to.
And
Love her. Love her.
yes, you have to have her, George. I'm telling you. And she was the one, for example, we were, grabbing people so she could talk to. She was at the anchor desk when that actually happened. And I remember the show was over, and it was because it was like not right after 9 o'clock. And all of a sudden it was like this mad dash, like get back on the set, like get every, you know what I mean? And it was like that for days and for weeks. And it was a long, long, long time. I mean, we were stranded in New York because they closed down the bridges. I couldn't get back to Jersey. I had to stay with, friends in the city. And for me, it was just, that was my learning lesson, is learning how to separate, the business side from the personal side, because not only with my husband, but just everything that was going on emotionally. There was so much going on emotionally, and being able to tell a story and to do things like that when there's so much emotion behind it. The same thing happened, with Sandy. Sandy was another tough one. You're sitting there, and I remember this, gosh, so much. We were there the night before, just before it struck, and we did our report, and you're there constantly, you're in the truck, you go till like, maybe it was like midnight, 1 o'clock, the next shift comes in, and we stayed in a hotel, came back the next day, and that same road we were on, all of a sudden we just got stuck and we couldn't figure out why. And it was because the road that we had driven to get there was covered in sand because the water had come up so far. And it was just crazy. To see this house that we saw one day, and the next day they were gone. And being able to sit there and tell the stories and listen to people tell their stories of such hurt, but realize that it's important to get the word out about what's happening, because they need help. And that was the main thing, to make sure that these people had their stories heard. And that's the whole reason why I decided to become, a journalist and a reporter, is to be able to tell stories. Because you have to be the voice for the voiceless. You have to be that point of hope for people when they feel like there is none. When different things like that happen, you have to be that person that they can come to for comfort, for that feeling that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important things, for being a storyteller. And it was most important for me because, for me, I didn't have that voice, growing up. I just didn't. I was silenced as a young kid, and I was silenced. And it was just, it was tough. And I didn't want, other people to have to go through that, from being silenced.
Yeah. Yeah, incredible. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I want to ask you a couple of more questions, because I find this stuff so fascinating. So number one, right, and we're in a safe space here, so I think it's okay to pat ourselves on the back once in a while,
Okay.
when we're special and we're meant to do something. But you mentioned being able to separate the personal from the news, because you're there to report the news. That takes something special, whether that's leadership or whatever. That takes something really special to be able to say, okay, I'm worried about my husband right now, and all this stuff is going on, but we gotta get this news out there.
Yeah.
That's leadership, right? I mean, in a way.
Yeah, because you have to, just like in a role in a business, any business, you have to separate business from personal. You have to be able to do that. And I think that was one of the hardest things. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you. Some of the hardest stories we cover, I mean, believe me, in news, you see things that you don't want to see. I've seen things that I can't unsee. But you have the story to tell, and you have to move forward. But that's not to say when you get home, it's tough. Sometimes you would break down. Sometimes after a long day of reporting the same tough story, you go home and you have to just unplug and unwind and just sit in your own thoughts for a bit, because it can get emotionally draining, but you're there to do a job, and you're there to tell the story. And that is my job, to do it and to tell it to the best that I can, to make sure that whoever story it is being told, and it's being told properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, to separate that too, because sometimes you get these stories and you are in near tears yourself, because it is just so hard to watch or to tell, but you got to suck it up, because there are people who are depending on you to be that strong force you know, to show that. And I think that is definitely one of the hardest parts, especially in leadership and business, is to separate those two.
Yeah, that's incredible. I can't even get through conversations about this stuff without, tearing up, just because it brings back so many emotions. But you mentioned Sandy, which I wanted to touch on, but and you did. I want to jump over that and go to Hurricane Maria. So, Island in Crisis. Is that the best thing you've ever done in your career?
That is the reason I was able to leave Channel 11 with peace of heart, is because that was the pinnacle of my career. That was something that I worked for, because it's something that, I kept asking for. Maria hit, I kept saying, look, we need to send somebody. We need to send somebody, and I would come in the office the next day to my news director. When am I going? When are we doing this? And it's just like, I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Then I would push. I'd be like, hey, I have these many contacts. I have these many stories. I can go out and we can do it. And finally it was like, okay, well, we'll let you go. And it was because it just meant a lot to me, because you're seeing all those stories, you're hearing all those stories. And I just wanted to go and tell them, tell them from a perspective of someone who, that's my heritage. That's my, that's my blood. That's, and it was something so special for me to be able to do that and to come back and, to tell those stories back here and turn it into a whole half hour, episode that, I wrote and I produced. And it was just, we had a great team that went out there, and, it was just an amazing experience. And it was hard, to see, there was a man who I remember, he was standing on just the platform of his house. He built this little shack right next to it, out of plywood. And I stood there and I said, where's your family? And he said, they went back, they're in Florida now. They went, and I said, well, why are you here? Your family's, back there. What's keeping you here? And he said, this is my home. I built this with my own hands.
Yeah.
And I'm going to rebuild this with my own two hands.
Yeah.
And it goes to the heart of the people. And that's why I wanted to do it, to get to the heart of the people and tell their stories that way. And that was one of my proudest moments. Yeah. At this
oh my gosh. It was, I watched all of it in preparation for this. Unbelievable. So a few notes here. So one is that we have a lot of public speakers that listen to this show, whether they're people that are just fan of my public speaking or the fact that I do public speaking coaching, whatever the reason is. This episode is sponsored by the new cohort of the Leadership Experience. Unconventional leadership, brought to you by yours truly, the LaunchDad himself, George Andriopoulos. Our new cohort is starting soon, and not only do we still have the same 4 courses, that's right, the public thought leadership track, the career leader track, the entrepreneurship track, and of course the podcast experience. We have our first graduate level, up level, inimitable, the newest one-on-one leadership class. This is for not only if you have taken the leadership experience core class before and are ready to graduate to the newest level, but for those that have experienced leadership and want to take it to a new level, Inimitable is for you. I'm not even going to talk about it in this commercial. You're going to have to contact me. Check out theleadershipexp.com for details and to sign up for information. Inimitable is coming at you. DM me for more info. Later, guys. For those that are looking for advice here, I will say you have to check out this this series, Island in Crisis. Go on YouTube and find it. When you're a public speaker and you want to be good at public speaking, a lot of people, what they do is they look at the mechanics of public speaking, and that, of course, you have to look at it, because if you're really going to master something, you want to look at every aspect of it. But if you can't storytell, then what are you doing there? This is such an incredible example of storytelling, and I'll tell you why from my perspective here. And for those that don't know, Hurricane Maria was the hurricane that completely devastated Puerto Rico, right? you did a couple of things here. One was that you represented an underrepresented area of the United States, right? It's a region, it's a province of the United States, whatever the technical term is. And they needed help, and they kind of weren't getting it in a big way.
They weren't, yeah.
They were not. And I saw it in many ways. I had a friend that worked for the governor in Puerto Rico during that time. And, you know, and I heard about that from the political side of things, and they weren't really being represented, number one. Number two, it's very easy to write off an area after they've been devastated like that and go, all right, you know, I'm not thinking about Puerto Rico anymore. I mean, I don't know what the breakdown is of tourism and revenue that comes into Puerto Rico, but I would imagine that tourism is a big part of
huge.
Their revenue. And so I knew people that would just be like, yeah, all right, well, let me switch let me switch my thing to Costa Rica or Dominican Republic or whatever. Right. What you did as part of your storytelling is number one was you were it was a love letter to your heritage, which I loved, right? Number two is that you represented them and you brought attention to what needed to be looked at with the crisis. But the most important thing was it was a piece of hope. That's what I love about it. The whole thing was just so hopeful. The tone was hopeful. The way you told the stories, it was a focus on rise. And that was a huge deal, you know, when I watched this thing. So bravo, it was such an incredible piece.
Thank you. Oh, you just gave me chills, George. You just gave me chills. And that's what it was. We wanted to portray not just here's everything bad that's going on, but to show that there was hope, that things could happen, things could turn, to show that side of it. As well. So thank you for
no, absolutely. In that same vein, and then we'll move on. We talked about 9/11. We talked about you know, what it takes as a journalist when you have to put the personal side of things aside and focus on getting the news out there, right? And so this is a theme in the news now. This is something that we've been talking about for, and I'm not going to get into politics here or anything, but for the last 4 years or so, we've been talking about this. Truth in the media, after such a tumultuous time in the history of our great nation, is in peril. You know, so I want to hear a couple of things from you. Well, the first thing I want to ask is, what is truth to you in broadcasting?
Truth to us is just not putting your opinion into the mix. It's about telling authentically what is going on and why it's going on, and how it happened. It's not putting your twist on certain things to twist a story a certain way. That's really what the truth is. There's a lot of, you know, opinion that gets thrown into a lot of things, and opinion is not a journalist's job. You know, and that's where the news has kind of changed a bit. Sometimes you see that a little bit more, especially with so much on you know, different cable and internet web shows, and you know, there's so much, you know, so many different ways to get the news nowadays. And I think that's what just the truth means, is just reporting what's going on, why it happened, how it happened, and who's being affected. And just stick to that, but tell it in an authentic way that people can understand and people can relate to. Because sometimes people try to get too technical and you lose them as you're telling the story. Tell it like you're going to tell your mom or your dad or your sister, your brother. You know, pretend that's who you're talking to. You know, don't try to tell it in a way that's too technical that it's just not understandable. So I think truth is just that in itself, not throwing your opinion in the mix. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes you do have an opinion and it's hard to sometimes hold back, but that's your job as a journalist, just to tell what's happening and to be that voice for the people and not to throw your opinion into the mix. And it's hard sometimes. It is.
Yeah. I love that. So the next question in this line is, how did you feel, or how do you feel, and how did you feel over the last few years as a journalist? You know, during these last few years of political unrest, when the very fabric of what you do for a living is being questioned.
Oh my gosh. It was watching the storming of the Capitol was so difficult to watch because it's just so many things, our country, our constitution, like everything, that we love about this country, and you see what's going on, and it's just heartbreaking. And like I said, that business and the personal. Like I remember, I now do radio for CBS Two National, and it was just nonstop. Like that's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. Because that's what was going on, and you're reporting the latest, and cutting the sound and getting the new sound, and here's what's coming in, and here's what's coming in, and you're doing it straight, and that's all you're talking about for 7-8 hours, and it's tough. So when I log off, I come back, and I just decompress. And I have to be honest, George, like I sat and cried, and it
Yeah.
was tough because it was hard to watch, hard to hear, hard to understand that it was happening. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was one of the toughest things to do. But it's the business side and it's the personal side, and you have to do your job and put the news out there.
Yeah. What do you think the outlook is like for the news going forward?
It's tough because it seems like nowadays anyone feels like they can be a journalist. It's hard to say that way because anyone on your phone, and they go out and report a story and upload it, and it goes viral, and now they're the latest. That's the latest, the next new reporter. And it's hard because these are things that we've crafted, and we've taken so much time and effort into, and it's hard to see just someone with the phone just go and take it away just like that. I think that's one of the hardest things for me, and I don't know where it's going to go. Maybe hey, maybe that's where it's going. But I think that's the next thing to know, is because you think about where people get their news from, it's probably from right here.
Yeah.
The way that people consume their news. Are people watching on TV now? Are they just getting the latest headlines from their phone? Things are changing, and I think you're going to see that start to change as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's move on because I want to dive into a few more things before we wrap up. Oh God, I love this. This is so good. Is that okay to say during an interview? It is, right? This is a great interview. All right, so after 18 years, you moved on from Pix 11 and moved on to a more national role, CBS News, radio news anchor, reporter, the whole deal. What was it like to move on to the next chapter?
I think that, what is it? After 18 years, people to this day, that was over 2 years ago since I've left Channel 11. And to this day, I still get messages like, man, we miss you. We love, what you did. And, because I did so many different things, from new, like it could be 1 hour, I could be, at a circus, and then a fire breaks the next hour and I'm off to cover the fire. You have to be able to transition like that. I've done weather. I've done so many different things. I've done crazy things like, I don't know, swimming with sharks and trying to report at this. I mean, you name it, George, I've done it in the business. But I think it's just like making that transition. It gets to a point where you feel like it's time to go to that next step. I've
Yeah.
done so many things. Like I said, Puerto Rico was my highlight for me. Like
Yeah.
that was my swan
We're
song.
ready.
That was my baby. That was it. And I saw things changing, and I saw things in the business changing, and it made me change. And when you're at a place that starts to make you change as a person, and you see that and you notice it, and your family starts to notice it, then it's time to make a change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was for me. So I did. I took some time off, just kind of decompressed for a while after waking up at 2 a.m. for 18 years. It was a tough one. And I just decided to make that change, and who I never would have thought of of going to radio. It was the wildest thing. And now I've done every medium. I've done newspapers, magazines, TV, radio. You name it, I've been there. But it was a great experience. I started at iHeart, and they were amazing, amazing, amazing. And it was just that spark, like, this is great. Like, I still can, have that same connection, but in a different way, And when coronavirus happened, that's when my career took another shift. That's when I was doing, TV for CBS. And then I took that shift into radio. With radio, I was able to do it from home, be here for my daughter, who's now in a hybrid schedule. You know how that goes
Yeah,
now.
oh,
With the
yeah.
kids. And, able to be here for her. So I decided to redefine what success meant to me. And that's really that turning point. And that's what I learned. Have grown so much, since I left Channel 11. Personally, just being there, so many years I've lost out with my family by, working the holidays and working, it's just, you lose out so much. And it was time for me to get that back,
Yeah.
to get that time with the family back. And that's what it was for me. And it's a great company, and it's a great new venue for me. I mean, I see you doing your podcast. I'm like, maybe that's the next thing for me. Like,
Oh
I'm
my
always
God.
like,
Radio's
this is
cool.
I
Radio's
love
cool.
it.
Podcasting is
It
cool.
is. I really, really love it. And hey, I can be in my yoga pants and
Right?
be good
I'm wearing my
housekeeping there.
Farmingdale sweatshirt here. And by the way, I could totally see you and I having an amazing show together. Something like something like the Boricua and the LaunchDad, do a show. It would be incredible.
The Puerto Rican and the Greek. Opa, come on, let's go.
Yes. So,
But I think that it's just a great trend, and I'm just loving it. Like, this is what I said, redefining success. This is my next, like, chapter. People always talk about their chapter 2. Like, what are you? I remember Cara Silva, you asking her, like, what's next? And it's like, I just want to learn more. Like, I just want to, take up as much as I can get. That's why I went to physical trainer too.
I love that. Yeah, and we're gonna jump into that in a couple of minutes. That whole growth mindset, right? And this is sort of where I'm going to go to now, how I'm going to segue. But that whole focus on health and wellness is so intriguing to me. So I'll tell the story about how you and I met. So I'm the executive producer of a TEDx event, and you had reached out last year when we had our call for speakers about speaking at our event. And when I first saw your application, I was like, so thrown by it because of your honesty, sheer honesty. As a public figure, not only to be able to storytell like this, but to be so honest about something. And I'm going to read a little snippet from the application where you write, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and rape who did not have family support nor access to professional assistance, I understand the emotional toll trauma can have for an individual. For years, I suffered in silence, trying to prove my worth until I finally decided to seek therapy. I learned that my past does not determine my future. I have the choice and the power to uncover my truth, rewrite my story, and inspire others along the way. Talk about it. I'm going to let you drive here because this is your story to tell.
Yeah, no, definitely. And thank you for doing that, for just getting involved with TEDx and giving people that platform to tell their stories.
Yeah.
I think that is so important because it's, I think it was that turning point, after I left Channel 11, I took time for me, to get back to me and what was going on, in my head and in my life. And for so long, I always remember I was always, worried about what other people thought, and all these other kind of things. And I couldn't figure out, why, I was just changing as a person. And it kind of took me back and, to be honest with you, I sat down and I talked with someone and I went to therapy, and it was beautiful and an amazing experience. And I always tell people, if anything, you need to just talk to someone just to get it out, maybe they don't even help you, maybe they don't even do, but just to hear you say certain things is beautiful. Because for so long, I'd mentioned that I didn't have a voice and I was silenced, and that's why I wanted to be that voice of the people. Because as a young child, I was abused. It wasn't by immediate family, but I was for years when I was younger, all the way till gosh, maybe 10 years old or so. And you were always, and I was silenced. So,
Yeah.
don't tell, don't say anything, don't say anything. And the reason I come out with this is because I want people to realize that, one, it's not your fault. And for me to say that was huge, because for the longest I thought it was me. That's why I was always trying to prove, out there, prove my worth and prove my worth to this, and, show that I was the best at this. But I finally learned that I was worthy. And that's the hardest thing sometimes to understand, and I think it was that from the past that was holding me back, because I didn't have, it was something, maybe it's cultural too. You don't talk about those kind of things, and it's silenced, something that you just don't talk about, and
Yeah.
it's kind of shoved, under the rug.
It's totally
And
cultural.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's something that I want people to realize, that you don't have to do that, and it's not your fault, and you don't have to be a victim of your circumstances. Just because that happened to me didn't mean that I couldn't keep going on and moving on to do what I did. I took it and I used it as a tool to propel me forward, to do that, to tell others that it's okay, and I think that was the biggest thing for me, is just coming out and talking about that, because it's not easy to talk about, and it's a tough subject, and it's hard to talk about. But when you finally understand, and you do talk about it, it's just such a weight lifted off your shoulders, and then you can finally start to unpack, different things, and understand, oh yeah, that's why I was this way, or that's why, this was that way. For the longest, it was so hard for me to show affection. I wasn't an affectionate person. And my husband, God bless him, is the so opposite. He's the huggy lovey, give me hugs. And he is amazing. And I think that's also probably what attracted, me in the first place to him, because I was looking for that. Because, even growing up, my parents didn't show affection. It was just, maybe it was just, that's the way they were. But I finally learned, what it's like to love. And George, you have kids, and what it's like for me when my kids were young, and they would come and hug me, and it was difficult, for me sometimes, to have that connection, because I didn't know how to love in that way. And it was so hard. And now, like, because of being able to go through what I went through, like, I can show affection to my kids, like I can show affection, to my husband, to others. It's a different way. I've broken that barrier. And that's why I call this like my second act, and my next, my next telling, my next story, my next venture.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is, so I can tell others about what it is, and tell their stories, and be that voice, and let them know that they don't have to be silenced. You don't.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, and I said it before, but just so brave. Number one, number two, so admirable, and really shows the leader in you to be able to say this, not for yourself. You've worked through it, and I'm sure still working through it. Life is a process, right? But this is about helping other people work through it and understand two specific things that you said. Always trying to prove your worth, right? If you can help somebody understand this earlier on than you were able to work through it, man, how much time are they going to save? Like, how much time did you waste in your life trying to prove you're so badass? You don't have shit to prove to anybody, man. You know what I mean? And so,
Always, yeah. Thank you. But it was always that, like, I was always trying to, like, always in the back of my head, it was, and I think in a way, George, I think it was a way of me trying to prove to those people who hurt me that they didn't affect me.
yeah,
And that's why I was always doing so much and always keeping myself occupied and living on 4 hours sleep and doing all these different things because I was afraid if I sat in my own thoughts, I would go back and think about what happened. And I didn't want to do that. But once I took the time to sit in those thoughts and really unpack it, I wish I would have done it sooner, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. The other thing you said, and then we'll move on. Past doesn't determine your future. I know
Yeah.
it's a cliche. It's one of those things that I could have a poster in the background and with like a nice scenery, maybe an ocean, maybe a beach view from Puerto Rico, and it says underneath, "Past doesn't determine your future." It's cliche, but if you can tell a story and get somebody to understand that and really understand that and engage, that's my line as well. This was the theme of my first TEDx talk that I ever did. Past doesn't determine your future. I said this very specific line. Oh man, if I can remember it right, I was in a very full circle moment. I was inducted into my high school's Hall of Fame a few years back, and in my acceptance speech, I said something to the effect of, well, I don't remember the exact line, but it was basically exactly this. Past doesn't determine your future. I told the story of how I fell in life, and realized when I got back up that doesn't have to be me anymore. So thank you for that message. And I want to, before we move on, I want to say real quick that as the organizer of TEDx Farmingdale, we just applied for renewal actually last night. We finished our mandate from the old event. We published all of our videos are finally published, and now we were able to finally apply for renewal. So if all goes well within the month, we'll be approved. And things are going to shift a little bit this year, right? We are going to have a very small call for speakers this year, and I'm going to exercise something I like to call organizer's prerogative, where I'm going to invite most of our speakers this year. And so we're not going to share any answers to these questions at the moment, but I have talked to Lisa. I have talked to Mrs. Carol Silva. I have talked to Dr. Greg Reed, author extraordinaire, speaker extraordinaire, who was actually supposed to be a speaker this past year, but we shifted him. Miss Melanie Klein, one of the top coaches in the country. We have potentially a very big lineup. Now, I'm not telling you if they said yes or no yet. You'll find that out eventually. But we have an incredible TEDx Farmingdale coming on this year. But yeah, so with this work that you've done personally, I think that's where this mantra of health and wellness and broadening that to not just mental health and wellness, but physical, shifted, right? And so you're a guru out there. Man, I was looking at your stuff and I'm like, damn it. Wellness.
Come on, George, drop and give me 10. Let's go.
Oh, yeah, okay. As I was running yesterday, my changing my daughter's diaper when the timer went off for the bottle warmer, and I ran down to the kitchen and I almost had a heart attack. We'll get there. Maybe you can help me out. Maybe you can help me get back.
You know what? Yeah, it's because I've been there. Like I remember, before, I had my son, he was my very first, and I remember I was going through a tough time then. And it's probably because I was dealing with a lot of the stuff from the past that I just kept pushing off, and I just found that comfort in food, just like how a lot of people do. Hey, I lived around the corner from White Castle. You know what I'm talking about, George. There was murder burgers and milkshakes for a while for me. That was in North Bergen. But it got to a point where, I had my son and I was just, you're a new mom and you're scared to death. I didn't know what I was doing. I had this little thing looking up at me and I didn't know what to do. And it was tough. Yet at the same time, I got to the point where I would pick him up out of his, carrier, take him up the stairs, and I was out of breath all the time because right now I was 50 pounds heavier than I am right now.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot. And I just went through that. Everybody goes through the trial and error, this diet, that diet. I'll try this, I'll try that. And I just did this up and down, up and down, up and down. And it was just frustrating until I finally buckled down and said, this is what's going to happen, because I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to see those milestones, because with obesity, there comes the rise of different kind of diseases, and I wanted to be there for every milestone. So that's what was that spark that got it in for me. And just the mental side of wellness too, that brought it in, and it really was. And for me, the focus right now is because as we get older, as you know, George, once I passed that 45 and now I'm hitting near 50, it's like, okay, I have to change up how I'm working out.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to become the personal trainer, because I was trying to keep up with all these, CrossFit and jumping and all these crazy things. And I wound up in hospital and surgery. And I was like,
yeah.
this is not right. Like this, I'm not doing something right.
Yeah.
And so I learned like the right way to go about things for my age, for my joints, and that was important because, hey, I did when I turned 40, I ran the marathon just because, that was like a milestone I wanted to do. And that is one of those pinnacle moments in my life too, that I will never forget, but my knees will never be the same. And again.
Yeah. It's, all the stuff that I see online, all your social media profile timelines are covered with health, wellness stuff, tips, your YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel is like literally logging on to Beachbody and watching it. It's crazy. My wife pays for a subscription to Beachbody, and I'm like, you got to just watch this YouTube channel. She's got everything on there. But and tell me if you agree with this. For me, right, it's one thing I need to figure out how to get back to the physically fit balance for me with everything else. But wellness for me mentally started with the family unit, with home. Right. With home being balanced and good, something that took me a very long time to figure out. It took me a divorce and a lot of heartache to figure out that to do this the right way, that this family unit has to be the center of everything. And so you and your husband, Jose, college sweethearts, right? Dated for several years, got married. You have a son and a daughter, and I see all these pictures on your Instagram, and I love it. I love it. Are they the core of what drives this for you?
Sure. Oh, most definitely. It's the reason. Like when I said I redefine how I describe success, family was a huge part of it, and I wanted to put that back first in my life because, like I said, I missed out a lot of that, because I was hustling so much and working the extra hours. And I had another show, Celebrity Tastemakers, that I was doing at the same time.
Oh, I want to talk about that too.
And I was just, George, I was all over the place. And, it was crazy. And it affected me mentally. Like it gets you and it wears you down and breaks you down. And that's why I always tell people, like, you want to lose weight, you want to stay on a schedule, you got to figure out why. Like there's got to be a reason. Like for me, it was my family that started that spark for me. Then it grew, then it changed, then it changed to, I want to motivate others, to do this, and now it changed again. Now I'm doing it for me. Like this is my time and I'm doing it for me. And that's what keeps me going. That's what takes me to my basement every day to go work out, is because it makes me feel good, and that's what it's about. Yeah.
Amazing. You have a line on your website, and I want to share this info. And by the way, I'm going to share all your info. You give me all your links and stuff. We'll have it all in the show notes, right? For the podcast. I help women and men age gracefully through fitness, mindset, and nutrition. That's the deal.
Yes, gracefully. And that's it. I don't want anyone in the hospital like I was.
You cannot train me then. There's nothing graceful about me in a gym. I was once, when I did Kempo martial arts for many years, and to my wife's credit, she's a black belt in it. I only made it to blue stripe before I tapped out. I'll tell you my story one day. It's great, and it centers around martial arts. I was once called the most robotic martial artist that they had ever seen in that dojo, which I don't think was a compliment. So,
That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
Man, we covered so much. The last thing I want to touch on, and then we'll move on to the big three. Food. You're a foodie, man. And first of all, Celebrity Tastemakers you mentioned. I love that series. Is that still going on or no?
It's being shown in New England now on NEC TV. Yeah, so it's up. It's made its way.
But there's
up to the
you
New
don't
England
film new
Coast.
episodes of that?
We haven't filmed no new episodes yet. So now it's just airing and reruns there. So we're kind of waiting
I'm
and
still
see.
watching.
It's kind of a hard time in the restaurant business right now. You have to understand. So
I'm still catching up. Two of my favorites were the episode with Burt Young, Paulie.
Oh, Paulie was the best.
Burt Young, and the episode with Michael Rappaport. I love.
Oh my gosh.
I love.
I know you're a Michael Rappaport fan.
I'm first of all, I'm a Howard Stern fan. Howard Stern 2.0. We've said this before. And Michael is on the show constantly. So when you reach out to Sukanya to come on the Launchcast, you have to reach out to Michael too. Please. Those would be two amazing guests for this show. But amazing show. I see your love of food and cooking. I did read somewhere that you enjoy cooking at home and love cooking for your children since it makes you happy to watch them enjoying your food, right?
Yeah.
Like
and because I try and get them involved too, so that they can understand and they can, people always talk about how do you get your kids to eat healthy? Well, you have to be the right role model for them. You have to show them, how to do it. If you're cooking healthy, have them join in with you, have them chop up some stuff. And that way they'll be more inclined to taste it because they realize the work that they put in for it.
Yeah. Amazing. And a little birdie told me that you love authentic Greek cuisine.
Yes.
By little birdie, I mean the internet.
Yes.
It looks like everything I read has been true. So amazing.
So far, so good. Yeah. There's a great, Kina, there was a great restaurant, Greek. Oh, amazing Greek food. I just love it because it's the freshest. You have the fish, you have the healthy vegetables, olive oil. I mean, it is the healthiest way to eat.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Last thing
Except
before
for
we
the
hit the big
baklava, George.
Last
that
thing
we
before
can keep away from.
Before we hit the big three, man, you TV and radio and iHeart and coaching and fitness and personal training and public speaking. What is next, Lisa?
I don't know. George, I keep saying that. Well, I came out with my goal this year for 20 was to come out with my own fitness program. And I did. And I filmed it. I called a friend of mine who I used to work with. He filmed it, edited it, put it all together. It is fantastic. It is a low impact strength training program for middle-aged men and women out there. Because I just felt like that audience needed something, because instead of just feeling like, oh, I got to be the modifier. And no, like you can take part in this workout throughout the whole thing and not feel like you're just being the modifier, it's low impact and it's great. And it's called Fitness Forward. That was my goal. So I have done that. I've created this online community. Next, I would love to take it to the corporate route, to see health and wellness is such like a big important. I mean, coronavirus has propelled this to make people realize how much more important it is, especially nowadays.
Yep.
But yeah, I keep seeing, like, I see your podcast, I see all these people's podcasts. I'm like, man, I don't know. I have all the radio equipment. I'm like,
yes.
I don't know, George.
Join us. Join us. All right, guys, it's the big three.
The big three from the Launchcast.
The big three. The big three. We are throwing some things out there, and Lisa's going to give us her top three quick, concise. Well, as quick as concise as you can make it. Ready?
Okay.
All right. This is a good one. First one. 3 things you do better now at close to the age of whatever, right? I don't know if we're allowed to say that number.
Approaching 50, yeah.
Approaching 50. 3 things you do better at almost 50 than you did before.
Oh, wow. I am stronger mentally and physically than I have ever been before. And that is huge. Yeah. So that's okay. That's one.
Yeah.
Stronger. Things that I do better now. I have more patience now because I take that time to myself. Before I would just snap,
Yeah.
snapping my kids and snapping it. And now I just kind of sit back. Okay, so I'm stronger, I have more patience. And gosh, what else? I think ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I just think overall,
Well, you gave me mentally and physically, so it's technically two.
Let's
So
go.
that we got three. So we got three total. Good. All right, this is a good one. 3 favorite dishes, any cuisine, anything. 3 favorite dishes.
Oh my gosh. It's got to be arroz con gandules that I make at home now with brown rice. So I've learned to twist it up a bit,
Uh-huh.
to fit the way I eat now. That is just a Puerto Rican dish. It's rice with pigeon peas. I guess that's how you say in English, and it is just phenomenal. I That's my favorite dish with some baked chicken on the side. That is one of my favorite dishes. Three, 1, 3. Okay,
Three. Only 3.
three. Oh gosh. Okay. I also love my cheat dish. It's just a good old fashioned burger, George. A burger and a beer, and I
There
am
we
good.
go. There we go.
Good. I gotta have that in my life. If you can't treat yourself, then you work so hard at trying to keep out. You can't treat yourself. Burger and a beer. Those classics.
I saw a little
And
Brooklyn come out when you said burger and beer.
I do-
You were like, I'm good.
to tell you, the hardest thing of anchoring for a nationally, a national broadcast is watching my New York accent. I'm telling you, George, coffee is now coffee. Talking is now talking.
Yeah, I can't do that. I
Yeah,
have no control over it.
it's tough, but yes, you learn to switch it up. But you brought it out of me.
You know what my favorite Puerto Rican dish that I ever had, by the way, is there was when I was in the pharmacy industry, there was this dude that worked for us. He was a delivery driver, Ruben.
Okay.
I'll never forget Ruben, and Ruben is actually gone now, unfortunately. But
Oh.
we had a Thanksgiving at work, and everybody. A very multicultural office, right? And everybody had to cook something, some type of entree or side, and bring it in for the day. And Ruben made pernil.
Oh, pernil.
And he
Yes,
was
of
like
course.
telling me, he was like, George, he's like, I got that pork shoulder. I put it in 8:00 last night at 1:25, and I sat in my chair in the kitchen all night long. I didn't sleep at all. I was just watching it, and I'm like, dude, that melted in my mouth. It was like pouring off the bone.
Oh, that and pasteles are the other favorite one. That
Yeah.
is because that's when families get together and make it because it's intense. It takes a lot to make it. So you have this whole assembly line going. But I do not know how to make them, and I hope one day I do, but I will be happy to eat them.
All right, next one. 3 least favorite exercises. Least favorite exercises.
Ooh. Oh gosh. Leg day is tough for me. Even though
There you
it's
go.
so
Everybody hates
good.
leg day.
But it is so good because it's like the biggest muscles. You burn calories throughout the day when you
Yeah.
do leg day. But every day I'm like, here we go. Yeah. The leg day is the tough one. I love my upper body, doing my biceps, my shoulders, but the lower, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's just go, let's go. Cardio is I like, doing, different high intensity intervals, but sometimes cardio, is a little bit tough for me too. I love my weights. I love my strength training.
Yeah.
So that's another one.
Yep. All right. 2 more? Yeah, hey, we could do 2 more. 3 most poignant, and I think we've probably covered most of these, but 3 most poignant moments in broadcasting for you.
Ooh, in broadcasting. One, it would have to be definitely Puerto Rico. I know we've spoken about
Mhm.
that. That is my upper pinnacle. Another one of those personal stories that you get to tell about a family that you become friends and you have connections with their family.
Yep.
I remember I told a story about this family in the Bronx and their son who was going through, he had a certain kind of disease and it was tough. And I just told that story and I made this connection with that family and it just stuck. Like to this day, I still keep in contact, on Instagram and social media, like we're back and forth. And that really stuck for little stories like that. But of course, it's always, the 9/11 and the Sandy, those are like those mile markers that stick with you, that really make a difference in your growth as a journalist.
Amazing. Last one.
Yeah.
Three hopes for your kids.
Oh gosh.
With everything you've learned in life, 3 hopes for your kids.
I hope they like me. How does that work?
That counts. Yes, that counts for 2.
No,
Amazing.
I hope, and it's funny because I had this conversation with my son who's going to college too, and you send him off, and it's the hardest thing, as a parent. But I just hope that what I've taught them about hard work and being your own advocate and being your own voice and being, not relying on others, but doing things yourself, to be able to do that. I hope that resonates with them. And I hope that they take that with them, on whatever journey, wherever life takes them. I hope, if anything, that's what they have learned from me, is that you need to work hard. You have to be able to have that confidence in yourself to go out for what you want, and don't take no for an answer. Don't. I think it was Kamala Harris who said, I eat no for breakfast, So it's just to be able to do that and keep coming back, even when people say no to you.
Yeah. Amazing. Guys, Lisa Mateo, geez.
Thank
oh my
you.
gosh.
Thank you,
Thank you for being here. Hang out in the green room for 1 second while I wrap up here. But the Boricua and the Greek coming at you, new podcast. It's coming at you. It's going to take over the world. Thank you, Lisa, for being here. Loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, it's the new segment that we are trying out. This is that Clubhouse segment, right?
Into the Clubhouse.
We did great with this last week, and I got to say that now that this podcast episode came out, the leader of the Clubhouse episode that I did last week, which released on Monday, the episode did really, really well. Really, really well. And I'm super excited about it. So I'm actually opening up another Clubhouse room here. Let me just find it. It's somewhere here. We got it. We're starting the room. All right. Here we go. And we are on Clubhouse, and we're going to, of course, let people know that they're going to be recorded as we're doing this, but let me start pinging people here. So thanks for joining. This is the Launchcast podcast live. We're on episode 206 today, and the Launchcast is a podcast that talks about leadership. And so this room is going to be all about leadership. I want to hear people's thoughts on leadership, how you bring leadership to what you do on a daily basis, whether it's your business, whether it's public speaking, your community, whatever it is that you do. So I'll start with, I know Sylvester said he might be tied up. Let's start with Patrick. Patrick, thanks for joining, man.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to say, for everybody that comes up to speak, just know I want to make sure you're okay with being recorded and this going out on our podcast, if that's good with you.
Yep. Nope. The witness protection program said I'm good.
Awesome. So Patrick, tell us about what you do, and really I want to hear about leadership and what the term leadership means to you and how you bring leadership to what you do for a living.
Well, when I think about leadership, I mean, we've probably seen a million different graphics and representations of what leadership is, but I like the one where, it says this is not a leader, where, it's a guy being pulled by all these people and he's up on a throne or something and he's whipping the people, and that's not the leader. The leader is the one who's at the front of the pack, leading the way along with the people. And so to me, the work I've always done and do is about sort of showing people the way by living my example and by walking my talk. And that gets tricky sometimes because, that requires a lot of vulnerability, and it requires a lot of trust. It requires a thick skin some days. And but I think to me that's what's important, because otherwise, if I just sit back and only present the rosy side of things and only present the upside of things, I'm not really leading. I'm pretending, or I'm hiding. And that's kind of been my approach to it.
Yeah, I especially love what you said about leading alongside others. And, we on this podcast, we talk about unconventional journeys to leadership. That's what this thing is about. As a leadership coach and a management consultant, my whole deal is just about helping people discover what it is inside of them that drives them, and then bringing it to their platform, whether it's their businesses, their public speaking, their whatever platform, their coaching. And so, yeah, that's been the resounding feeling from most of the people that have been interviewed on this podcast, is that leading alongside others is what has made them successful. So yeah, Patrick, thank you. I made you a moderator also. And so anybody you want to ping in here and bring them into this room, I think we're going to have a great room tonight. But thanks, Patrick. Sylvester, I'd like to hear from you, man.
Yeah, before I'm headed to a client site, and I wanted to go ahead and get this in and contribute. And so I appreciate you bringing me on. So when I think of leadership, I write mobile apps, custom software, and I do IT consulting and development. And in my community, I'm responsible for finding opportunity zones where we can, build out communities that are safe and durable throughout the diaspora. So, as you can probably imagine, just like you guys are very busy. But to me, one of the things, I think Patrick sort of touched on it, is my example. I think that if you talk to people, I was reading a study in college, and they were talking about why people don't follow certain people, right? Like what do you do to get people to follow you, basically? And one of the thoughts that came out is that, why are they asking me to do something that I know that they would never do? And so one of the things that leadership requires, in many cases, is that you be the example. You be the person that does the hard work and the heavy lifting. I'll never forget, I was working for a company in New York in my younger years, and like an internship, and one of the big VPs had been there for 30 years. My mom had come to town, and she wanted to meet some of the people that I worked with. And we were looking for him. He happened to be a very tall gentleman. And we were looking for him. And he was picking gum out of the carpet while we couldn't see him, because he was bent low to the ground. And so his philosophy was always, whatever needs to be done, do it. Don't worry about what your title is. And so at 20-something years old, which is like 30 years ago, I got some really good lessons about what leadership really looks like.
Yeah, Sylvester, thanks so much for sharing, man. I appreciate that. Let me ask you a quick question before you run to your client. Talk to me about what kind of impact being a leader has had on what you do with your clients. Talk to me about the difference between Sylvester as a leader and if Sylvester was doing what you're doing now without that concept of leadership, what that difference would be.
Wow, that's a great question. I think a couple of the bigger things that step out as soon as you ask that question are that, it's a matter of not even being prepared for it, because I don't know that I asked to be the leader, quite frankly, but it just happens to be a part of what I am and how I was created. And so it creates a challenge, for sure. I make way more mistakes than everybody else, and I take more criticism than I think most other people. and it requires humility, and I say it requires it is because humility is understanding your limitations, but it also is recognizing where your strengths are, and so it requires a lot of self-development, introspection, meditation, all those things that people don't want to take the time to do. I know I didn't want to take the time to do it because I just want to live life and move forward. Unfortunately, but unfortunately, in some ways, Sylvester, the leader, has to slow down a lot and really be a student of life. And I think that's the difference. Is I become more of a student of life than I would have been had I not become a leader.
Yeah, I love that, Sylvester. It's funny. I talked about this earlier today a couple of times, once in a Clubhouse room and one to a friend of mine that I was speaking to earlier. When we come at things as a student of life, right? I think, first of all, that is such a strong leadership trait. A lot of the conversations lately on Clubhouse have revolved around Clubhouse, right? They're revolving around what an unbelievable platform this is. And I know that we all know that we're sort of on the ground floor of this. We're in the beginning stages of this. And so it's amazing right now. And it's not going to stay this way. Something's going to change. We're in on this at a very good time in history, Clubhouse. But I feel like so far the most successful people on Clubhouse are the ones that are not only there to be of service, but the ones that are there as students, right? And so as a platform right now that's bringing thought leaders to these rooms, I think that when we as thought leaders come to the table as students and are there to learn things, and of course we're here to offer up the resources and experience that we bring to the table, I think that makes things so much better. It up levels everybody in the room. The story I was going to tell was I hopped into a room the other day, and it was a public speaking room. I forget what the title was, but it was something along the lines of like, tips for public speakers or come practice, something like that. And it was three very talented ladies who I followed. I don't remember their names offhand, that were running the room. I'm sure they are public speakers and they are very well versed in the mechanics of public speaking. And so what they were doing was they were hosting a room for either, existing public speakers or brand new public speakers, aspiring public speakers, and they were doing sort of this like improv type of deal, right? And it was cool. It was like, they were going sort of around the room like, hey, Steve, tell me about your last name and what does it mean, and talk to us for 2 minutes. And it was just these exercises in public speaking. And so I love that I hopped in there anonymously. I didn't jump in there when they asked me what I do. I just said, hey, George, I'm a consultant. I didn't mention that I'm a 3-time TEDx speaker or a TEDx organizer or a keynote speaker that's been doing this for years. I just hopped in there as a student because I wanted to experience this. And they said, so George, tell us something, spend 2 minutes telling us about something crazy you've done in the last 6 months that you never thought you'd do. And so I went telling a story about how we had our third daughter 10 years after I had my son and never thought I'd be a dad again. And really, heartfelt, emotional story about that. And it was so cool to get this feedback from these people who had no clue that I do this for a living. And honestly, they helped me too. They gave me feedback that was incredible. But then to be able to give back to the room and say, hey guys, thank you for the feedback. I do this for a living. So if I could be of any service to anybody else. And it just became such a lively room after that. So I thought that was a great story, but great point, Sylvester, about, coming at things as a student of life, man. Really, really great point. Shows, your mettle in leadership. So let's move on to Corey. Corey from Canada, eh?
Hey, George.
Corey, what's happening? Thanks for joining today. So I'm gonna preface this by saying we are live on the Launchcast here, so I want to make sure everybody knows they're being recorded. And if you're cool with that, stay in the room. Otherwise, hop off. And I'll share the information for where this is going to be when we wrap up later. But Corey, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and talk about leadership in your life and what it has meant to you.
Awesome. So I am from St. Catharines, Canada, and it's a little bit cold over here today. I am an energy alignment coach. And so what that is I help people kind of realize their patterns and habits and that stuck behavior and then how to get over it in order to maximize your energy in your business so that you can take it to the next level and be who you want to be in your business and in your life. And so it's interesting. I was listening to, a couple of the speakers before me talking about leadership and what it is. And it's so interesting how, much like Sylvester, we just kind of fall into it. I don't think many people plan it and go, this is the thing that I want to do with the rest of my life. You get that urge to do something more and be something better. And you start to follow, step by step. And it's interesting because I just did a post on Facebook about this, and it's that epic failure that I think us as leaders, we take those failures and we learn from them and we dissect them and we try to figure out like, what can I change and how can I make this better and how can I reach for the stars in a way that shows other people we're human too. Like everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has these, like nobody gets it perfect the first time around. And so it's kind of showing people you just got to stick with it, go all in, and you'll get there. You'll do the thing that you are passionate about, and it provides other people that comfort in knowing they're not alone. Like everybody out there is kind of doing the same thing in different avenues.
Yeah, amazing. And I got to say, I want to point this out. I know Corey, guys. Corey's an incredible coach, and what she does, she does some really unbelievable work. Check her out. Follow her on all her platforms. But I will say that there's a sort of up level to leadership, and I want to talk about this in a minute as well. But there's a sort of up level to leadership, right? There's the discovery of leadership in what you do and in your platform, and then there is that moment where you just sort of master it. And Corey knows I use this all the time, but that Luke Skywalker moment, right, where you just understand the Force and you're just like in complete control of what you do. And I noticed, Corey, this year, just watching your stuff, how you have just totally taken it to the next level, up-leveled what you do, and just stood up as a leader in your community. And you're like, hey, I'm here, right? Let me help you out. So I want to congratulate you on that, Corey, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, it's been interesting times because you're right. You get to that moment where it's more uncomfortable for you, I think, to go back to those old ways and that old way of thinking. And I think that burning desire is there to keep moving forward. Like you're always looking at like, how can I show other people? How can I pave the way for other people to make this easier for anybody behind me who's trying to figure out their journey?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Corey. It's incredible feedback from you. I want to move on to Fred, Mr. Fred Banny, my man. Fred, thanks for joining us, buddy. Fred, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your platforms, and tell us, man, I know you could spend an hour a day on leadership, Fred. But tell us about leadership in your life and what it's meant to you and your platform.
No, absolutely, George. Just want to thank you for bringing me up. Hello to the room. My name is Fred. I'm a life builder. So pretty much what I do, I help individuals grow in alignment and just empower and equip leaders with principles, insight, just to grow in purpose and to live an impactful life, well-rounded, right? Just not in business, but really starting from home base, yourself, family, community, and then into the world. So now, as far as I was listening earlier to Sylvester. It was part of the time when I jumped in, and I love what he said about being a student of life. And I think that's what leadership is to me, right? Leadership really, like John Maxwell said, is really influence, it's service. Leadership is not a title, it's not based in title, but it's based in your being, it's who you are. So it doesn't matter, what part of an organization you are. One of my philosophies in life is everybody, we are all born to be leaders. We are equipped with the potential. However, that potential comes in the seed form. And through our lives, we then have to be very intentional about developing that seed form and growing into the fullness of who we are as a leader. One of my favorite quotes about life is our job in this life is not to ship ourselves into some ideal we imagine we ought to be, but to find who we are and already become it. And for me, that's what leadership is. It's who we were born to be, but we just have to discover that seed. We have to develop it, and then we have to deploy it into the world, into the culture, into how we make other lives better. And that's what it really is, coming back to who we are. Because when you think about, the great analogy I love to give, when you think about an oak tree, right? The future of an oak tree is in the acorn. So if you hold an acorn in your hand, you're holding an oak tree in your hand, but just in seed form. But once it just goes through that process just of time, of development, of nourishment, of fertilization, of becoming, then over time, over years, you get to see that oak tree. And I like to say that's how our lives are. Once we discover, and it's through the crucible of life that we really discover the true pillars of leadership: character, integrity. It's not, being the person who's like giving direction and who's the boss. Now it's really serving. It's not being the smartest person in the room. It's not being the person with all the answers, but it's the person who can really galvanize people towards the cause and really can inspire hope and inspire change and move people forward. That's what it is. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you just have to be the person who's very hopeful, who's very optimistic, and looking at situation to be able to listen. Together, we can overcome that if we put our minds together, we put our expertise together, our experiences together. So it's really serving, but it starts with you first. If we cannot lead ourselves, then we really cannot lead anybody.
Amazing. Thank you, Fred. Any questions or comments for Fred before we go to the next person, Payal?
I just want to say I totally love that, Fred. That was an awesome explanation with the oak tree and the acorn. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. Before we continue, again, reminder, guys, we are live on the Launchcast podcast. Right now, this is being recorded, so if you're not comfortable with the recording, you don't have to step up to speak. This episode will be out on Monday at 6 a.m. on all podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora. It's part of a greater episode. It's a new segment that we're doing. We're doing a Clubhouse segment on everybody's on every single episode. And so I'm screenshotting everybody that's on here and speaking. I will reach out to you through whatever platforms you're available to get DMs on, and I will send you the info for the podcast once it releases. And anybody that wants to share anything, I could insert it into the podcast notes. So just DM me and do that, right? So let's move on to our next speaker. And again, one more thing. I made a few of you moderators on here. Feel free to ping anybody that you want. We're going to go probably for another 20, 25 minutes on this room. Ping anybody that you want to join us today. And remember, it's Clubhouse, so just hop on, follow each other. Make sure you keep up to date on what everybody here in these rooms is doing. So let's move on to Payal. Thanks for joining us in the room. A little bit of a different room, right? It's a live podcasting room. We're trying something different. But tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do, and talk about leadership. Tell us what leadership means to you and your platform.
Hello. Thanks for having me, George. I honestly just came across this group on my Explore page, and I'm so glad that I did, because these are some really great conversations. And I think leadership is such an important skill to constantly be learning and exhibiting throughout your daily life. A little bit about myself. I currently graduated from my master's program. I studied human health and nutrition here in Toronto. And since I just graduated, I've been sort of job hunting and looking for some opportunities within the healthcare field. During my university career, I did have some leadership roles, but I'm still a bit new to it, and I'm obviously looking to expand on my skills and hopefully become a strong leader someday in my career as well.
Love it. Thank you for joining, Payal. Anybody have any questions or comments for Payal before we move on to Sarah?
Yeah, I just have a comment. The Canadians outnumber everybody here because I'm from Montreal, so we can take over anytime we want. Just so you know,
Well, New York is representing here too.
Yes, New York is here heavy, right?
Thanks so much for the comment, Patrick, and thanks, Payal. Let's move on. Sorry, thanks so much for the comment, Patrick, and thanks, Payal. Let's move on to Sarah. Sarah, I'm looking at your profile now. Sarah, thanks for joining. Tell us about yourself and tell us your thoughts on leadership and how it applies to your platform.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Just like Payal, I actually did get invited into the room. She's one of my great friends, and I'm excited to be here. I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing. A little bit about myself. I did recently graduate. I was in the States. I was studying psychology at the University of Michigan, as well as playing on an athletic scholarship for softball. So I did recently just graduate, and I landed a great job here in Toronto. I'm originally a Canadian, so I've always lived here and stuff. I just decided to pursue more of my athletic career in the States. But recently I did get promoted to a supervisory position here at my job at Morneau Chappelle. And I'm very excited for that. And it's definitely going to be a challenge for me and to learn different aspects and to lead my own team. And I definitely think a part of leadership is just being an approachable leader. And I think that's my type of leadership style, is being somebody that my employees can come to me and, be somebody that they can lean on, whether it be personal or work related. I want them to feel comfortable around me. So that is something that I'm taking towards my job. And I'd love to hear if anybody else has any leadership tips for a newbie going into it. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I want to say first, Sarah, that it's actually refreshing to hear this. When we're on platforms like Clubhouse and LinkedIn, business owners and entrepreneurs tend to run across a lot of other business owners and entrepreneurs. So to hear somebody talking about leadership from the standpoint of leadership within an organization, an employee within an organization, it's really refreshing. And it's something that I've seen in the last couple of years of doing what I do as a management consultant and as a coach. I'm seeing a lot of people within organizations that want to stand up and learn how to lead better, which shows me a lot more care, within their own careers, admiration and sort of a respect for what they do for a living and the organizations they work for. So if I can give you one piece of advice for somebody that worked for others for so many years before becoming an entrepreneur many years ago, it's that if I could have your mindset when I was younger, I don't know where I would be right now. It's a very enlightened mindset. I'll tell you that, to think about leadership and how important it is to lead others with respect and care. So just keep doing what you're doing, but from what it sounds like, and you'll have a lot of success.
Thank you, George. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anybody else have any feedback for Sarah?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to second that, George, what you just said to Sarah. Sarah, what comes through for me is exactly what you said, being approachable and just handling people with care. And I think sometimes, people put the position over people, right? Leaders put the position over people, and they forget as a leader, you were only as good as the people around you. So I love, and hearing you speaking and to George's comment, what came back to mind was we're all leaders regardless of what position or where you are. If you're leading your own company or if you're working within an organization, leadership is the state of being, right? It's who you are regardless of the position or the title that you're playing. So you putting that humanity back into it, as opposed to people sometimes look to posture. Look, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, you just barking orders. But not forgetting, they are people, they have dreams and aspirations, they have families just like you. And everybody's just trying to find their way, but treating them with care and respect. That comes through for me when I heard you speak. So I'm definitely cheering you on and best of luck and wishing you all the success in your endeavors as you move forward.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. Definitely going to take a lot of what you guys said and take it towards what I do every day. So thank you for that. And thank you, George, and others for having me here. I definitely love that you guys are doing this, and I'm excited to hear the podcast coming out. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining. I want to do an exercise because we have about 10, 15 minutes left. I want to do an exercise with everybody in the room. I want to talk about the worst thing as a leader, the worst thing, the worst, how do I explain this right? Maybe we'll say the biggest mistake you ever made in a position of leadership that caused you to turn that mistake or weakness into a strength. All right. So we'll start at the top of the room again with Sylvester if he's available. I know he was going to a client. All right. So it looks like Sylvester's tied up. Let's go to Patrick on this.
Yeah. Ask me that question one more time.
So I guess I'm looking for maybe the biggest mistake you made in leadership that taught you a lesson that turned that mistake or weakness into a strength for you.
Well, I think it would probably go back to the common theme that we've been talking about, which is, I caught myself not listening to the people that I'm leading and not, coming at it from a place of authority or coming at it from a place of not being open to other ways that I hadn't thought of. And, being humbled by that when I realized, oh, wait a minute, this person, what they're suggesting or what they're saying is actually makes a lot more sense, and I should probably take that into account. So, at first my internal reaction, thankfully I didn't externalize it and react on it, but my internal reaction was like, defensive. It was like, wait, I'm the leader here. I'm the one in charge. Why are you questioning me? Why are you offering a different opinion? I didn't ask for an opinion. I told you this is what I needed to have done. And then when the person came back with an alternative, I caught myself thankfully and was able to reflect on that and realize, oh, you know what, maybe I don't have it all figured out, and lesson learned, and move forward that way.
Yeah, great, Patrick. And just to follow that up, has that become a strength for you now? However much later, I don't know how long ago that was for you, but.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because, that was in my career in the sales world. Then I had a 12-year career where I trained people as coaches, like life coaches and business coaches. And, that was definitely something that I've realized, back in the sales days is when I learned that lesson. And that's something that I brought into the coach training piece. And I just wanted to say that to Sarah also. I think looking at leadership within your team, within your role in the organization as, part leader, part coach, because I really find that you can coach the best out of people much more effectively than we can try to lead the best out of people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Patrick, for sure.
Thanks, Patrick. And I want to throw it out there too, guys. Check out Patrick and follow him. I've seen Patrick in quite a number of rooms, and we follow each other. Patrick has always been of service in every single Clubhouse room that I see him in. Really, just giving out gems. So I want to tell you I appreciate that, Patrick, and thanks for joining us today, and thanks for that little bit that you gave us just now.
No problem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to Corey. Same question to you, Corey.
Okay, so can you repeat it one more time? What was the mistake that I made that?
Damn you, Canadians.
I know.
So I guess the I want to say mistake or weakness, but really the biggest mistake you ever made in a leadership position that you learned from and turned into a strength.
I think honestly for me it's that going all in, right? Like I think that we get tied up in the perception of like what are people going to think and what are people going to say, and like that judgment piece. And I think for me, I was really caught up on that in the beginning, and I was really holding myself back. And, like you said earlier on, right, this year I really stepped up my game, and I really got into this position of like, I don't care anymore. I don't care what everybody else thinks. I don't care what, about the judgment. I really just want to own me, because if I can reach one other person out there who is struggling, who needs my message and my voice being said in my way, and I can help them, then that makes it all worth it. And that person's never going to find me if I'm holding back. So I think, the lesson in there is I never would have got there if I didn't hold back in the beginning, if I didn't go through some of the mistakes that I made, really kind of honing in on my skill and my message and, all of that. So I think that would be it, is really just, going all in and just be you, be authentic, be you, and just own the shit out of yourself, really.
Thanks, Corey. And yes, you can curse.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Corey.
I think that's a Canadian thing, eh?
Or you just know how my rooms go and how my podcast goes. All right.
Definitely.
Let's move on to Fred. Same question for Fred, buddy.
Yeah, so now that's a good question. So a while back, I was working with with a group of people, and I was kind of like getting a bit frustrated because things wasn't going as I had envisioned, and I was having a conversation with somebody, and they posed a question to me that really kind of helped and shifted me. And it's like, Fred, if you're in a rowboat, and you have 5 people in that rowboat, how many people would you like to keep to help row as you journey to your destination? I was just like, everybody. Everybody's in the everybody's in the boat. Everybody has a paddle. We all need to row, so the faster we're gonna get there. And it's like, yeah, that's it. And then it dawned on me, my frustration was coming from the fact that whenever I came into the meeting and everything, I felt as the leader, I was the one who was to give out directives and who was the one to always have the right answer and always not just set the vision, but always be the one saying, oh, this is what we need to do, this, and that. And then I realized these are all intelligent people that I have on my team. These are all intelligent people that I have the privilege to kind of steer and to lead. I need to pull from the well of wisdom, from their years of experience and expertise. So rather than making a decision and coming to the room and then telling people, why not just ask, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? This is what it is that we're looking to achieve. What are your thoughts? And then gather all those insights. And then as a leader, you make the final decision, or you kind of bring it together, because that way you buy ownership from the people that you're working with. Even if the final decision is not an idea that comes from a person, the fact that you included them in that conversation, in that decision making. And for me, that totally transformed and just shifted how I lead, because I don't have to come to the room with answers. And I was getting frustrated because that's the approach I was taking. And when that question was posed to me, if you have 5 people in the rowboat, how many people will you want paddling to get you to your destination? So what that revealed to me, take advantage of the resources around you. People are just not there to be robots. People are there. People don't come to work from neck down. I want to be around people who primarily come from shoulder up, meaning people who are thinkers, people who are, who are looking to innovate. So that's it for me. Just really, bringing everybody that's around me and getting the best out of everybody, and then coming together and making the best decision to move forward. And sometimes my insight, my decision may not be the best. So let the best idea win and not the person.
Wow. Thank you, Fred. And for those that don't know Fred, this is a guy to have in your corner, right? This is a guy that everything he just described, this is who he is as a leader and as a human being, and really knows how to bring the best out in people and work with a team. So, and that's what I love about things like this, when thought leaders like this come out and speak their truths. Like, this is the real deal. This is advice that you would be paying for. from other professionals, right? If it wasn't on Clubhouse. So thank you, Fred. And really the moral of the story is that if I ever go out in a rowboat, I have to bring you with me.
I got you, brother. Always, you know that.
Love you, brother. Thank
Yo.
you. Payal, let's go to you. Same question. Biggest mistake or biggest weakness within leadership, and how you've learned from that and turned it into a strength.
Thanks, George, for repeating that question, because I was just going to ask you to do that again. So I'm just going to give an example because, I saw this in my life as a university graduate teaching assistant. I led about a class of 90 students, I would say. And obviously with 90 students, that's a lot of different opinions and learning styles that I had to consider when I was teaching. So oftentimes I caught myself giving into students' demands in terms of marking scientific papers and all of that, because I didn't want to disappoint them, and I really wanted to be a likable TA for them and sort of avoid upsetting my students. But I think as a leader, I should have pushed them to face their challenges rather than sort of give in and push them to step out of their comfort zone, because I do believe a comfort zone is a dangerous place, and you can only really grow when you're in a challenging environment. So overall, I would say it taught me to sort of stand my ground and support my students by challenging them, even if they may not like it in the moment. I think that it's important to have those conversations with whoever you're leading at the time, and it's important to challenge them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that, Payal, and I actually have a follow-up question for you on that. And so you are, can you tell us again, what do you do for a living?
So I just graduated from my master's program. I did human health and nutrition. I studied that, and then I'm currently job hunting, but I also started a podcast with my friend Sarah here in the group.
Oh, cool. Awesome. So this is an interesting question I want to pose to the group, and we can kind of sound off whoever wants to take it. But what you just spoke about, Payal, with challenging the group, right? And trying to get the most out of them when you know that there's more in there. This is something, as we talk about weaknesses and strengths, that personally I have always struggled with, as like a typical overachiever, whatever you want to call it. I look for excellence in others as I expect out of myself. And you're not always going to get that. But there are times, and especially as a consultant, when I can sort of read the room and I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. I sort of know when somebody has more in the tank that they're not giving me, right? Or giving the team, or whatever the case is. And so I do love that mindset of challenging others in order to make them better. For me, that's how I was brought up in the professional world. I was challenged and challenged and challenged because, those who brought me up and mentored me knew that I had something special inside of me. And eventually it came out. I may not have liked those challenges at the time, but I appreciate them now. The problem for me is that when I do challenge others in that way, they'll either say that that's not their level, right? That they can't keep up with whatever I'm trying to put out there. Or I do it in a way that's, I don't want to say not polite, but you know what I mean? Like when you're challenging others and you want them to give you more, sometimes it doesn't come out in the right way. And so I want to see if any of you have ever struggled with that in ways, that you've alleviated that and been able to bring the best out in others while getting with them not hating you in the end. How about put it that way?
I don't know. I would change one word. So rather than challenge them to give more, I would invite them to give more. And I think that for me, that shifts the tone from like, hey, I don't think you're giving your all, to more of a, hey, I really think you're capable of more. And I think that subtle shift takes it from landing potentially harder to a more of an encouraging push. And that might get more results from people.
Yeah, great, Patrick. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with Patrick. that was great. I think that's a great distinction, right? Because we think challenge will always fun to overcome, but that's true. Just inviting people and trying to enroll them into their future or into whatever the project that it is. Not, I often think, and I encounter this a lot with people, like people really don't lack motivation. We just lack vision, right? Because if I cannot see what it is that I'm working towards clearly, or if I cannot see the benefit in that, and if I don't feel like if I don't have ownership in it per se, then people become very apathetic towards things. And so I think, um, helping them, just communicating in a way where they could see themselves a part of that and realize that, listen, exactly what you and Patrick said, there's more that you have to give. You may not see that yet, but if you don't believe it, just believe in the belief that I have in you. Hold on to my belief in you until your belief catches up, right? But just invite them and try to enroll them into that vision so they can kind of lean on your clarity until they themselves can become clear. And I think that's how we can really get to move people from A to Z.
Yeah, and I'll add to that saying that I think, and this is almost an epiphany I just had, really. I think when you can sort of take yourself out of the situation and sort of step outside of your body and look at it from the outside looking in, it's the best approach to gaining clarity in a situation like that, right? For me, it's funny, as a consultant, I can go into somebody else's business and talk to every single employee that may have been quote unquote problem employees that the company was having an issue with, whatever the case was. And really through communication, challenge them or invite them to do better and to lead better, and usually successfully, right? But when it's my stuff and I'm invested in it, it's so different. Fred and I worked together on an event for the last 2 years in a row, and last year's event had a group that was just they understood my vision, I understood theirs, and it was just, man, did it work, right? And the second year we did this event, not so much. I needed a challenge interpreter, and that actually happened to have been Fred, who was my speaker whisperer, who who was actually able to speak to these people who I was trying to challenge in a way that he could effectively communicate much better than I could, because visions weren't aligned in that specific instance.
I love all of that. And I just want to add, it's interesting, how Patrick was saying, rather than challenge, invite people. One of the things that I say to clients when I work with them is just that whole idea of, like, if I could wave a magic wand for you right now and life would be everything that you want it to be, there's no limits, what would that look like? And for me, I think it gets people to come outside the box of what they think they can have and dig in a little bit deeper. And then you're really just encouraging them that they have the ability to go for that. Like, you can go for the stars. You have that in you, that drive and that fight to kind of go for more. I can see it. And, like Fred was saying, if you don't see it for yourself, believe in my belief of you until you have that belief for yourself.
Yeah, that was good. And George, if I may add, right? I think a lot of times, like, we all have this, right? These invisible, what I call invisible handicaps, and a lot of it has to do with mental, with our mindset, our mental state, and people are battling that, like, and it may be around worthiness, it may be around, capabilities. And I think sometimes before we prescribe things, we have to diagnose. Like a good doctor, it does not give a prescription until they first diagnose the problem, what's ailing you first. And based on that, gathering that information, they can offer you or prescribe to you the best remedy for whatever ailing you. So I think sometimes when people, come to a full stop or get in a rut, we just can't motivate them out of it, right? We have to sometimes spend some time with them and just see what's going on in their life. What kind of space are they in? What is that invisible underlying current that's pulling them, that is sucking away their motivation? Because if we're just looking from the surface, they might just be showing up, But just because you're physically in the place does not mean you're present. And I think if we can get to that root and provide some help and some invitation and some enrollment into it and really kind of help them restart and reignite, their flame, just their passion and their zeal again, we can get them going. But I think sometimes just be it for time or because we're so focused on the task at hand, it goes back to, I believe, what Sarah was saying, first, just caring for people. We become so focused on the task or focused on the position or whatever it is that we want to accomplish that we forget about the people. Like, people run the entire show. This is a people moving machine. So if we can take care of our people, the problems go away. Because you have motivated, inspired, just, on fire people, you're not going to have a lot of problems because everybody will come to work. Everybody will come into the organization. Everybody will own their role. They will take ownership in it, and they will bring the all. But again, what I like to say, people just be people. It's people. So we just have to at times be patient and just check in with one another outside of the task. How are you doing? How is your heart? How is your family? How is your mental state? Because that's the engine that really runs everything. So if we can take care of those things, then we can get the car moving.
Amazing, as always, Fred. Thank you. Let's take a pause on this conversation for a second just to bring the two newest speakers in here. And I'll preface it again by saying, guys, we're on a podcast right now. We are recording the Launchcast podcast live. This is a new segment we're doing on Clubhouse every week where we're bringing this segment into each episode of the Launchcast podcast. So if you are good being recorded, hang out and speak. Otherwise, you can step off of being a speaker or jump out of the room. Okay, guys? So I'll bring on Christine first. Christine, tell us about a little bit about yourself, what you do, and talk about leadership on your platform and why it's important to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me, Patrick. I would say for me, we are fairly new. So in my own business, I launched just over a year ago. And in the new business, we only actually incorporated at the end of December. And when I was thinking about what you were saying, for me, it comes down to, I think we as leaders have to be super clear on the vision, the mission, and what we really want to achieve. And if you're having difficulty with somebody that's maybe not giving it their all, maybe it's that they're not clear enough with your vision or your mission, and maybe sitting down and having a conversation saying, this is our overarching vision. This is what we're striving to achieve. Maybe find an accomplishment that they did have and highlight that and say, I'm looking for new ideas, or I'm looking for this, and what, tell me what you can contribute. Maybe you can't come up with that right now, but encourage them to come up and contribute to that vision, that mission.
I love that, Christine. Thank you. Let me add to that and ask you the follow-up question we asked everybody. Is there a specific mistake or mistake you made or weakness that you had in a leadership role that you were able to turn around and into a strength?
You know what? I've always struggled with that role because, in a lot of cases, these were people I was working with that I actually had personal relationships with. And I would say, knowing what I know now, I would make a very clear separation with anybody that I'm actually leading and not necessarily to have that friendship relationship outside of work. I just think it's hard to separate the two. I
have been there myself. Early on in my career, that was a big problem. Big problem. Not only a mistake that I made, but a mistake that those that I worked for made, which were it basically brought like work people into every part of my life, which was really difficult, right? Because you got to get away sometimes. But once I moved on and started my own company, I knew that was a clear boundary that I had to make in order to maintain my personal life and my professional life is two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough thing now, I'll say, because of social media, because of branding, because of what we do as professionals and how we have to put ourselves out there. It has become tougher and tougher. I remember way early in starting my company when Facebook was like more fledgling. I would not friend any clients or anybody on the professional side of things. And then, you start the professional page and the groups and all that kind of stuff. But it sort of melded, especially when I became a public speaker and a TED speaker and started doing coaching. It was this thing of just getting friend requested by clients and potential clients. And you're kind of like, you know what? I think all of my professional profiles now have to become professional. Sorry, all of my social media profiles have to become professional, and I can't really have anything that's private when it's out on social media anymore, just to be able to maintain that boundary. But yeah, totally agree with you there, Christine. Let's move on to Sarah. I think it's Sarah, right? I saw that in your profile. SG. Thanks for joining us. Tell us about you and your platform and what leadership means to your platform.
Well, thank you for having me as a speaker, George. And yes, it's Sarah, or SG, and I am a confidence and mindset coach. And my platform is just to help individuals find their space, whether that is in image, whether that is in their own limiting beliefs, whether that might be into growing their mindset into success, because I always say confidence is an inside job, and I authored a book about that, and that is what I truly believe, and that is what I want other people to find within themselves, is that it's not something that we portray, well, we try often to portray it on the outside, but really it is an inside job that we have to work on ourselves daily, and it's a process. And we often don't think of it as that. We look at people walking down the street and we think that they're confident, but when you get to know these people on a coaching level or on a personal level, you find that's not always the case. It's not about, being on the cover of something or being the head, being chairman of the board of a corporation. There are still areas that we can all lack confidence in.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to ask you a follow-up question on that, since you are a confidence coach. Confidence and leadership, are those two synonymous with each other to you?
Me personally, yes. I believe that when you're truly confident as a leader, that resonates with the people that you're surrounding yourself with. You often, I know myself, when I was in that role, my leadership through confidence enabled me to let go and let other people show me that I had what they were made of and that I had confidence in them. So it was kind of, we're feeding off of each other. I had confidence, but yet they knew I had confidence in them, and it rose their confidence level.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that, SG. Guys, we're just about to wrap up here. Any closing thoughts? Just raise your hand or hop in if you're already on the mic. I can't take any new speakers right now because we got to wrap this up. Maybe we can go around the room if you want. We'll start with Sylvester if he's available. If not, we'll move on to Patrick. Sylvester, you there, buddy? Okay, Patrick, talk to me, man. Closing thoughts here.
Closing thoughts on leadership. I think everybody has something to offer, whether you're the functional or stated leader of a group or organization or team or whatever it is, or whether you're the very new person on the team. And don't be afraid to step into that role. Don't be afraid to lead. And even if it's just leading yourself or if it's leading a group of people, look for the leadership and let it shine through you.
Another good one. Thanks, Patrick. Corey.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's that go all in mentality, right? Just commit and think big, go for the stars. You've got nothing to lose.
Thank you, Corey. Fred, talk to me, buddy.
Yes. What I would add, I would just say, just remember that being a leader, or just leadership, is more about being than doing, right? And just know that this is just like life is about learning. We are students of life. Leadership is about learning and becoming. So as just always look to learn, always look to put yourself in an environment and around people that's going to stretch you, that's going to challenge you. And just know that, it's in you. It's a seed. And with time, with the right nourishment, you're going to grow and fully develop and become the person that you already are.
SG, closing thoughts.
Make your goals and set them high, and you will achieve them. Never doubt yourself. Always go in with the knowing that you are capable of anything that you want to do.
Thank you, SG. Yeah, go ahead, Janine.
My thoughts on leadership. I would say, as much as it is important, to be a leader and to be clear and concise, with how you want to lead your team, it's also equally as important to come to the table with the heart of collaboration. Because if you can collaborate, you can communicate, you can connect, and that empowers everyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that note. I'm so glad we hung around for that. I appreciate it, Janine. Again, send me your info, everybody, on DM at Launchpad CEO, and we'll include it in the show notes. So good night, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Look at that. We did it again. Let me take this off. Man, I love this segment. And this is building week after week. This was an hour. I think I'm going to have to edit this down and see what we can pull out of this. But another great segment. Clubhouse every week. We're taking over Clubhouse. The Launchcast is taking over Clubhouse. They need to reserve a parking spot for the LaunchDad there. All right, guys, moving on. Into the Clubhouse. Oh man, what an episode. I love these interviews. I'm so happy to have had Lisa on today. You know where we are, 6 a.m. every single Monday morning. Apple Podcast, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, the whole shebang. You know where to find us. See you later, guys.
Into the black hole.
Thanks for listening to the Launchcast today. Please make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available. Follow me, George Andriopoulos, at Launchpad CEO on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And make sure to visit our website, guys, thelaunchcast.com. Looking forward to the next episode. See you soon, guys.